As World War II reached its fever pitch, heavy fighting devastated both Europe and Asia. Yet, far removed from the front lines, on the fog-swept island of Jersey, another kind of struggle was unfolding. Inside a sprawling, tomb-like mansion, Grace Stewart lived in self-imposed exile, waiting for a husband who might never return from the war. Her life revolved entirely around her two young children, Anne, her precocious 10-year-old daughter, and Nicholas, her fragile 7-year-old son. Both were afflicted with a rare, severe sensitivity to light, a condition that transformed their home into a labyrinth of shadows where every curtain remained drawn and every door stayed locked. In this suffocating stillness, the children's existence felt less like a life and more like a haunting. As strange occurrences began to plague the household, an unseen force seemed to be systematically deceiving the family's senses. If the world outside was being torn apart by the tangible horrors of war, the world within was being dissolved by a much more terrifying possibility: that everything they perceived, their home, their safety, and even their own identities, might be nothing more than a grand, spectral illusion. They notice that doors in the house open on their own, and they often hear footsteps and whispers. One day, Anne discovers others in the house, a boy named Victor. Gradually, the children also see the boy's parents and a blind old woman. To care for the children, Grace hires 3 servants: Mrs. Bertha Mills, the housekeeper, Edmund Tuttle, the gardener, and Lydia, a mute housemaid. All 3 had worked in the mansion years before. It is through them that Grace begins to learn the dark history of the house as they recount the tragedies that once unfolded within its walls. Eventually, the strangers haunting the mansion, unable to endure the persistent disturbances, summon a medium to conduct a seance in a desperate bid to identify the restless spirits within. The term seance finds its roots in the French word for session, derived from the Old French soir, meaning to sit. While the modern seance is a staple of Gothic horror, such practices of necromancy, the art of communing with the dead, trace their lineage back to ancient Greece. These rituals find a striking parallel in the ancient Chinese tradition of Fuji, spirit writing, where practitioners use a suspended sieve or stylus to channel divine messages. The seance employs specific illusions of manifestation or spiritual possession to bridge the divide between the living and the deceased, serving as a conduit for both communication and divination. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the legendary creator of Sherlock Holmes, was perhaps the most prominent advocate for the modern seance. Interestingly, he was not alone in his spiritual pursuits. Many of history's greatest scientific minds, including Guglielmo Marconi, the father of radio, and Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone, were deeply engaged in the promotion of these rituals. They shared a profound belief that a realm existed beyond death, and they envisioned a method of spiritual communication akin to the telegraph, allowing the living to wire messages to the departed. Driven by the staggering loss of life during the 2 world wars, the seance experienced a powerful revival from the late 19th to the early 20th century. This resurgence of spiritualism was no coincidence. In a world scarred by relentless conflict, the seance offered a desperate technological age hope that the voices silenced on the battlefield across Europe and Asia might still be reached through the invisible airwaves of the beyond. Within the context of Grace's crumbling reality, this ritual acts as the ultimate catalyst, peeling back the layers of sensory deception to reveal a truth far more haunting than any ghost. The seance, conducted by the strangers in the mansion, ultimately summons Grace's daughter, Anne. Through her spirit, the harrowing truth is finally unveiled. In a moment of utter psychotic collapse, Grace had smothered both of her children with pillows before ending her own life with a shotgun. The intruders, Victor and his family, are, in fact, the living inhabitants of the house. Grace, her children, and the 3 servants she employed are the restless dead, tethered to the estate by their own denial. This revelation mirrors the narrative twist in The Sixth Sense, where child Cole Sear can see the deceased, many of whom are unaware of their own passing. Just as the child psychologist Malcolm Crowe remains oblivious to his own death until the very end, Grace's world is built upon a profound sensory deception. Great stories always offer profound insights. They force us to confront a haunting Cartesian ambiguity. If our senses can be so easily deceived, then between the living and the dead, what truly remains to distinguish one from the other? Drawing a parallel from the story of illusory reality, we arrive at the ancient Chinese philosophy of the butterfly dream. Zhuangzi, more commonly known as Zhuangzi, was a native of the state of Song during the Warring States period in China. In 318 BC, the state of Song was granted the status of a feudal state. However, by 286 BC, the kingdom was conquered and obliterated by the state of Qi. Zhuangzi died in the year his homeland fell. In his work Zhuangzi, named after him, he recorded his sorrow over the fall of his country. He wrote,
"When a man sees the old state and the old capital, he feels a sense of joy. Even though it is overgrown with hills and mounds, with tall grass and trees covering 9/10 of it, he still feels joy. How much more so when he sees what he used to see and hears what he used to hear, when it is like a terrace 80 feet high standing in the midst of the crowd."
The state of Song was situated in the region now known as Shangqiu, Henan, and Huaibei, Anhui. Zhuangzi himself was a native of Meng, a location near modern-day Shangqiu. Crucially, the people of Song were the descendants of the Yin Shang dynasty, which had been overthrown by the Zhou dynasty. Because of this ancestral heritage, the state of Song remained less influenced by the rigid Confucianism of the Zhou. This allowed Zhuangzi's intellect to remain unshackled. He championed the way of nature and often took great delight in satirizing Confucian scholars. Following in the footsteps of Lao Tzu, Zhuangzi inherited and expanded upon Taoist thought. It is often argued that ancient China produced thinkers rather than philosophers in the strict Western sense. However, Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi are the Chinese figures who come closest to the tradition of ancient Greek philosophers. In particular, Lao Tzu was the first to propose the concept of spontaneous order. It was not until more than 2,000 years later that this principle was formalized by the Western philosopher Friedrich Hayek. Now, the principle of spontaneous order resonates deeply with modern political and economic philosophy. Zhuangzi had a profound mastery of using allegories and metaphors to illuminate deep, complex philosophical truths. Among the many tales recorded in his namesake text, none has resonated as deeply or endured as long as Zhuangzi dreaming of the butterfly. This simple yet haunting parable has become the definitive symbol of the fluid boundary between the self and the other, the dreamer and the dream.
Once Zhuangzi dreamed he was a butterfly flitting and fluttering about, happy with himself and doing as he pleased. He didn't know he was Zhuangzi. Suddenly, he woke up and there he was, solid and unmistakable Zhuangzi. But he didn't know if he was Zhuangzi who had dreamt he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming he was Zhuangzi. Between Zhuangzi and a butterfly, there must be some distinction. This is called the transformation of things.
Through this parable, Zhuangzi presents a classic philosophical proposition. How can we distinguish between the original self who dreams and the self within the dream? Or, to put it more pointedly, which is the true self? Am I the butterfly flitting through the garden, or am I the man who has just awakened? Two millennia after Zhuangzi, the great French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist René Descartes arrived at a similar crossroads of consciousness. In 1641, he published his seminal work Meditations on First Philosophy, in which the existence of God and the immortality of the soul are demonstrated. Within its pages, Descartes embarked on a journey of radical doubt that mirrored Zhuangzi's ancient musings, once again bringing the enigmatic nature of dreams to the very forefront of human inquiry. I believe many of you are just like Descartes, frequently finding yourselves in recurring dreams with the same familiar settings. Some, like me, might even experience serialized dreams, where tonight's story picks up exactly where the last one left off. Descartes noted that he had countless dreams so vivid they were indistinguishable from reality, such as the simple act of sitting by a fireplace in his dressing gown. This led him to a chilling question. If dreams can so convincingly mimic the real world, how can I, or you as you read this very article, be 100% certain that you aren't asleep right now? Taking this a step further, he proposed the haunting hypothesis of the evil genius, or evil demon. Imagine a being as powerful as it is cunning, a master of deception who has dedicated its entire existence to creating a flawless illusion of the world just to trick us.
I shall then suppose, not that God, who is supremely good and the fountain of truth, but some evil genius, not less powerful than deceitful, has employed his whole energies in deceiving me. I shall consider that the heavens, the earth, colors, figures, sound, and all other external things are not but the illusions and dreams of which this genius has availed himself in order to lay traps for my credulity. I shall consider myself as having no hands, no eyes, no flesh, no blood, nor any senses, yet falsely believing myself to possess all these things, I shall remain obstinately attached to this idea. And if by this means it is not in my power to arrive at the knowledge of any truth, I may at least do what is in my power. That is, suspend my judgment, and with firm purpose avoid giving credence to any false thing, or being imposed upon by this arch-deceiver, however powerful and deceptive he may be.
Yet, despite facing the same existential riddle, Zhuangzi and Descartes arrived at profoundly different conclusions. It is as if these two great thinkers, standing before the same crossroads of consciousness, chose to embark upon two entirely divergent paths. To outmaneuver the evil demon, Descartes deployed a relentless weapon: pure logic. His line of reasoning was both radical and fascinating.
I can doubt my body. It might just be a sensory illusion conjured by the demon. I can doubt the external world. The sky, the earth, colors and shapes could all be fragments of a dream. I can even doubt mathematical truths. Who's to say the demon hasn't manipulated my mind to believe that 2 + 3 = 5?
I can't believe it.
Descartes pushed this to the limit. I can imagine that nothing exists. However, he hit a glitch in the demon's deception, a singular, undeniable exception. Even if everything is a lie, the I who is doing the doubting must exist. To be deceived, there must be a me to be tricked. To doubt, there must be a me to do the doubting. Therefore, as long as I am thinking, I must exist. In this manner, Descartes solidified his definitive proof through a masterful sequence of logic.
The premise. Imagine a malicious demon who exerts every ounce of its power to deceive me, leading me to believe that the heavens, the earth, and even my own physical body are nothing but grand illusions. The reasoning. If this demon is relentlessly deceiving me, then there must be a me who is being deceived. If I did not exist, the very act of deception would be impossible. It would have no target. The conclusion. Therefore, the fact of my own existence is the one absolute truth that remains beyond the reach of any doubt.
I think, therefore I am, became the foundational cornerstone upon which Descartes reconstructed his entire system of knowledge, the first principle of his philosophical architecture. As he famously declared, I am, I exist, ego sum, ego existo. Whenever it is uttered by me or conceived by the mind, it is necessarily true. For Zhuangzi, however, the butterfly dream presented no such intellectual conflict. Rather than seeking a logical bedrock, Zhuangzi introduced the concept of the transformation of things, 物化. To him, the butterfly and the man were merely different physical manifestations of the same universal spirit. Imagine the ocean. Its waters evaporate into mist, rising into the sky to become clouds. The clouds then transform into rain, which feeds the rivers, eventually flowing back into the great sea. The cloud, the rain, and the river were all once the ocean, and they will become the ocean once more. They differ in form. This is what we call the distinction of things, but they are identical in essence. They are all water, connected by the Tao. 物化, the transformation of things, means realizing that you are simultaneously that fleeting cloud, that single drop of rain, and the entire ocean itself. Therefore, a cloud need not regret that it is not rain, nor should it cling to the obsession of remaining a cloud forever. Zhuangzi's wisdom lies in the liberation from the obsession with fixed identity. To him, it matters little whether the self manifests as Zhuangzi, a butterfly, a bird, a fish, or even a blade of grass. On the level of the Tao, all these forms are interconnected through the process of transformation, Qua. True wisdom is the ability to simultaneously perceive the distinction and the transformation, to see both the profound individual differences and the underlying oneness of all things. In contrast to Descartes' first principle of the thinking self, Zhuangzi's first principle is qi wu, the equality of all things. He articulates this foundational truth in the discussion on making all things equal.
There is nothing in the world greater than the tip of an autumn hair, and Mount Tai is small. No one lives longer than a dead child, and Peng Zhu died young. Heaven and earth were born together with me, and the 10,000 things and I are one. Now that we are one, can I say anything? But since I have already said that we are one, can I say nothing? 1 plus what I said about it makes 2. 2 plus 1 makes 3. Going on from there, even the most skilled calculator could not reach the end, much less an ordinary man. If we go from nothing to something and can reach 3, how much more so if we go from something to something? We need not go on. Let us rather stop here.
Zhuangzi did not merely propose the oneness of all things. He pushed the logic to its ultimate conclusion. If all things are truly one, why must we speak of it or attempt to dissect its essence? He reveals a profound linguistic trap. The moment we define the one, we create a duality consisting of the definition and the thing being spoken of. This creates the one, the concept, and the two, the deduction. When these are added to the original unspeakable essence, we arrive at 3. To Zhuangzi, this is not a literal set of 3 numbers, but rather the various manifestations of the primordial essence within the prism of human subjective consciousness. Thus, he concludes, "We need not go on. Let us rather stop here. Wu shi yan, yin shi yi." He urges us to cease the human obsession with categorization and verbalization, to return to the source and harmonize with things as they are. In this light, Zhuangzi's first principle is the direct antithesis of Descartes. While Descartes sought to confirm the human essence through the rigors of thought, Zhuangzi argued that using human intellect to forcefully distinguish between the essence and its variations is nothing more than a game of subjective perception. The story that opened our journey today is drawn from the haunting cinematic masterpiece, The Others. At the heart of this atmospheric labyrinth is the character of Grace Stewart, brought to life by the prodigious talent of Nicole Kidman. Born in Honolulu, Hawaii to Australian parents, Kidman has become a global icon whose career transcends simple stardom. She possesses a rare, chameleonic ability to inhabit complex and mercurial roles, particularly those defined by intense psychological tension. In The Others, she masterfully portrays Grace's descent from Cartesian rigidness, clinging to the logic of her domestic walls, to the eventual Zhuangzi-like acceptance of her transformed state. Beyond the silver screen, Kidman is a formidable producer and a dedicated humanitarian, having served for years as a goodwill ambassador for UN Women. As we close this exploration of reality and illusion, let us find inspiration in the grace and confidence of her own words.
It's a very brave thing to fall in love. You have to be willing to trust somebody else with your whole being, and that's very difficult, really difficult, and very brave. The thing you hate about yourself tends to be the thing that everyone likes about you. Whatever you do in life, don't give up on your own dreams. Forget the past. You can never predict what the future is going to be. Live for the moment. Even from a very early age, I knew I didn't want to miss out on anything life had to offer just because it might be considered dangerous.
Thank you for joining me on this intellectually charged journey. From the unyielding persistence of "I think, therefore I am," depicted in The Others, to the limitless liberation of Zhuangzi's "The 10,000 Things and I Are One," we have done more than merely deconstruct a film. We have reached out to touch the very pulse of the evolution of human ideas. If you found value in today's exploration, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and share it with your friends. Our mission here is to continuously unravel the evolution of human ideas and examine the hidden forces that define success and failure in the human experience. Throughout history, it is not merely our tools, but our underlying philosophies that determine our destinies. I look forward to continuing this dialogue with you and a growing community of thinkers as we navigate the vast map of human wisdom together. Until our next journey.
Stay bold, stay curious, and always trust the journey.